I'm a 13-year-old male who currently lives in London, England. This story happened a few days ago, so it's quite fresh in my mind. My journey to school every day consists of a 30-minute bus ride and a 10-minute walk. It seemed like the days were getting darker, so I normally like to walk with friends to school. But that day I was only with one friend. Let's call him Kyle. Our walk to school also consists of an alleyway, which after 10 minutes leads into a small wooded area with a path. It's kind of a strange little path, considering the moment you're out of it, it's just houses and a big school. But the place never bothered me until this day. All of my other friends wanted to go to the store across from the start of the alley, so it was just me and Kyle. We began our journey that morning. About 2 minutes in, we see a man standing next to a car on the right side of us towards the gate. The window of the car was open, and the man seemed to have his hand in the car. Kyle whispered to me, "Is he trying to steal that car?" I looked back at the man and we immediately locked eyes. We began to walk a little faster until we reached the wooded area. We felt a little better and we decided to slow down until we heard the sound of a twig snapping behind us. Now, I'm a very paranoid person and I have quick reflexes, so almost instantly, I turned a full 360 around me to see what it was, but there was nothing and I didn't see anything. As I began to look around more, I saw a figure move behind a tree. Kyle seemed not to care as he continued walking. I caught up to Kyle pretty quick and I asked, "Did you see that man?" Only for Kyle to say, "What man?" So I brushed it off. Maybe I just saw a shadow. We continued to walk until I felt a cold, uneasy feeling. I turned to see once again nothing, but I don't stop observing. I'm looking around and I finally see a figure crouch behind a bush. My parents have always warned me about stranger danger, so I immediately bolted it. Kyle didn't have any idea what was going on, but quickly followed. Stupidly, we went off the regular path. We were just running rapidly around the woods. I took out my phone only to realize I forgot to charge it the night before. I asked Kyle to take out his, but he left it at home because it was broken. We heard footsteps getting closer to us. Quickly, I looked around to see a few bushes around us and we hid in one. I prayed to God and Kyle looked on the verge of tears. But then, we heard the sound of a phone ring. I heard someone pick it up and start talking, and what I heard them say gives me chills to this day. Why are you calling me right now? I've got exactly what you're looking for. Just meet me in the woods by such and such. And then he hung up. It took about 3 seconds for me to realize the reality of the situation. The footsteps only got closer and closer. I closed my eyes, but then I heard it. "Hey, what are you doing?" I heard a voice call out and twigs and leaves snapping and crunching rapidly. I looked up to see an older kid from school standing in front of us, and I saw the man walking away at a fast pace. I don't know what would have happened to Kyle and myself if this older kid didn't follow us, but I do feel I learned a valuable lesson. Always be prepared for the worst. After an appointment I had, my mother and I went into a shop called Ned's. We walked around Ned's for a while, looking for something that I'd like to buy. We must have spent about 20 minutes just walking around. After that 20 minutes or so, we got a call from what I thought was my dad. My mother answered the call. My dad asked where we were and she said, "At Ned's at the shopping center." He replied, saying that he'll be there soon. 10 minutes later, he called again, saying, "Where are you?" My mother answered, "I told you we're at Ned's." And that's when things start to get really creepy. "You never told me you were at Ned's," he said. My mother replied, confused, "Yes, I did. Yes, we did." "No, you didn't," my dad said. "I'm at here, the clinic." "But I said we're at Ned's," my mother exclaimed. My dad sighed and said, "All right, I'll be there soon." A few minutes later, he arrived at the shop. He came in and had a conversation with my mother. She checked her phone call history to show him that he had called and that she had in fact told him previously that they were at Ned's. What she found was a contact at the same exact time that she had picked up that previous call, but it was not my dad's number. What's even creepier was who the number belonged to, but my dad's recently passed brother, who sounded exactly like him. My only explanation for this is that maybe it was him from the other side. Maybe he doesn't know. he's dead yet. This is a story from a friend of mine who hasn't really been the same since the event. He downloaded a browser he called Tor, which allowed him to browse the dark or deep web. There he found websites that were selling things that were illegal, as well as sites that had pictures and videos of horrific events. After exploring dozens of sites, he ended up clicking on a random link that took him to a webcam and a chat room, similar to a Twitch stream, I guess. And this is where it gets really messed up. Appearing on the screen was a little boy. He seemed very dirty and was extremely malnourished. He looked like he hadn't been fed in a month. He seemed to be in a type of cell or prison room. The way the camera was angled, you could see 2 milk cartons cut in half, one with water, and one that looked to be filled with dog food. The comments in the chat were even worse. People were offering bitcoins for the host to hurt the child. And the specific actions they were requesting were disturbing. There was a timestamp below the video that was dated at about 53 days, so the stream was almost 2 months old. Whatever happened to this kid, it had happened a long time ago. What my friend is freaking out about now, though, is that his phone is acting strange now. The phone that allowed him to browse the dark web. His camera will take selfies of his face without him even opening the camera if it's angled towards him. I've been screwing with him, saying that it's probably something to do with the people on the dark web. But deep down, I think my friend believes it. I was 22 and just starting out on my own in the real world. I got my first apartment, a car, a job, and I didn't have any more school to worry about, or parents to bother me. However, the one thing missing still was a girlfriend, the serious relationship that I'd always wanted, and I figured it was time to try for one. I downloaded Tinder, and for a few days on my spare time, I would swipe through various girls in my area. I did have a few matches, but none were all that chatty. But one day, I saw this girl that I immediately thought couldn't be real. I had never been so attracted to anyone. I liked her and immediately matched with her. I wasn't even convinced she was real, but for 2 days, we spent all our free time chatting, and I asked if she wanted to go on a date with me. I was nervous, expecting to be rejected or told that it was too soon. But she replied with this: "Why don't you just come over?" Winky face. My eyes lit up, and I immediately replied, giving her my address and asking if she wanted to come over instead. She said tomorrow, 9 p.m. I was insanely excited to finally meet her, and I couldn't sleep that night. Before 9 p.m. the next day, I prepared the nicest meal I knew how to make, and the time finally came when I heard the knock at the door. I went to see if it was her, and my heart skipped a beat to see it was her, and she was just as beautiful in person. I opened the door and greeted her. I was so distracted by her beautiful smile that I didn't even notice the large man behind her, and by the time I did, he had already had his revolver out and had pistol whipped me in the back of the head. When I came to, I wanted to call the police, but I saw that all of my electronics and valuables were gone, including my phone. So I went to a neighbor's apartment and called the cops, but still she hasn't been found. No suspects apprehended. I guess I could say, no matter how good they look, always take them on a couple of dates somewhere else before you let them know where you live. This happened a while back. I was talking on the phone with a friend of mine. At the time, he was parked in his car in front of a forest. He had pulled over to chat with me. It was already dark out, and we were just catching up on some things. Suddenly, he interrupts the conversation, and his voice becomes a bit shaky. "Hey," he said on the other end. There's something walking towards me." The moment he said that, something struck me. It was like a cloud of dread just fell over me. I began to shake and have a panic attack, and I had no reason to. But he continued. "I don't know what it is, but it just came out of the woods." I quickly told him to just drive home, but he insisted that he felt that he needed to stay and see if it was someone who needed help. I heard him get out of the car, and he went to go check on it. After a little while, he told me this person that he was looking at was very, very tall. I became more and more anxious the further he got to it. I couldn't see the situation unfold, but I could hear it, and my heart was pounding. The next thing I knew, I heard my friend screaming from the other end. Then he spoke again. "It's crawling. It's in the grass somewhere. I can't see it. It's crawling." He was freaking out. I knew that area he was talking about, and around the tree line the grass was very high. If a person ducked down, you would not be able to see them. Then the other end went quiet. There were several seconds of silence before my friend spoke to it. "Hello? Do you need help?" "Get away from it," I said to him. Just get away from it." Finally, I heard him walk back to his car and close the door. He told me that he was driving away now, that he didn't feel safe there. But when he was back on the road, I heard him breathe. "Oh my God." "What is it?" I asked. "There's a row of rocks in the middle of the road. They weren't here before." My friend was stuck. Then I heard him exit the car, and he approached them. "I'm gonna try to move them." Before I could tell him that that was a bad idea, that he should just turn around, the call was dropped. I was left there, lying alone in the dark, wondering what happened to him. His car was found on the middle of the road, but as of yet, there's no trace of him. I was 18 years old, living in Washington State. I was driving home in a red pickup truck, and I had just dropped a friend off at his place. I had just exited the highway and was making my way towards my neighborhood. It was nighttime. I was just passing my high school when I saw a black figure standing on the sidewalk. I slowed down as I neared him. He was dressed quite nicely, as if he was going to a dance or something. He looked at me and was extraordinarily pale, and his skin was taut against his skull. "You need a ride?" I asked. Honestly, I probably sounded nervous. He stared at me with these droopy, dark eyes. Finally, he nodded without saying a word. He didn't even change his blank expression. I had a game console in the front seat, so the hitchhiker climbed into the back. I began my drive again, asking the man where he wanted to go. He was staring at a small gray piece of paper in his hand. He didn't look up, but simply said, "Just drive." I was very creeped out at that point, but just kept driving as the man requested. After a few moments of silence, I asked again where the man wanted to go, but I got the same reply, "Just drive." I asked over and over again 3 or 4 times. Every time he said the same thing. Eventually, I got annoyed that he was making me late for dinner, so I tried telling him where he might want me to drop him off. "There's a mall not far from here that has a really good Asian restaurant. You want to stop there?" A few awkwardly silent seconds passed. Then he looked up from the paper. He squinted those dark eyes at me and said, "Just drive." It was firmer this time. Then he looked back at the paper. Terrified, I decided to try and make conversation with him to pass the time, maybe even get on his good side. "So what you got there?" I asked, referring to the paper. "A photo?" Without looking up, he spoke again. "Wedding photo." His voice was no longer cruel. Instead, it sounded sad or hollow. He continued, even more pained this time. "She passed the day of our wedding." He paused for a second, then said this to me. I will never forget it. "We both did." When I glanced back at the man, after looking toward the road for 1 second, he was gone, as if he had never been there. This is a short and weird experience. It was supposed to be a typical night, and I was craving pizza, so I called up Pizza Hut and ordered. It had to be Pizza Hut, I remember, because it was closest, and I didn't feel like waiting any longer than I had to. I was given an estimated delivery time of about 15 minutes, but after about 50 minutes passed, I was getting irritated. By then, the Pizza Hut car pulled up. A short, blonde woman stepped out of the vehicle. She had her employee cap on backwards. When she was grabbing my pizza box and walking up to the door, I noticed she could barely stand up straight, and she acted like she was going to fall over at any moment. My first thought was that she was on something, but I shook it out of my head, not wanting to judge a book by its cover, even though that was kind of difficult at that moment. I simply reminded myself that I was finally getting my food, and I was hoping that it wasn't cold by now. It was around that time that I received a call. It was the Pizza Hut I'd placed my order at. They apologized for the delay and said that someone would be out soon. They then explained that one of the employees' cars had been stolen, and that my order was on the way now. I hung up. So, if my order was on the way, then who in the world was this? I noticed that when I picked up the phone, the woman had stopped walking toward my door. Suddenly, she straight up dropped the pizza box and ran back to the car, then sped away, nearly launching herself off the nearby curb at the corner. I ran to the road and got her license plate number. Immediately, I called the Pizza Hut back and asked if that was the right number, and they said yes. They were able to use my call as a tip, and soon the woman was caught, and she was found with a Glock in her back pocket. So that kind of answered the question that was haunting me. Why was she delivering my pizza if she had stolen that car? Why did she take the time to put on an employee's hat that she found? I think, just maybe, I narrowly escaped being the victim of a robbery. My sister, mom, brother, and I went to Target at the nearby mall. As soon as we got there, my sister said that her and my mom will be looking at movies, so Alex and I looked around, Alex being my brother. We went to see the Halloween decorations, messing around and trying a few of them on. Nothing really scared us at the time. It was more funny than scary. Then my brother and I headed back to where my mom and Ava were, Ava being my sister. That's when we heard a phone ringing. My brother and I looked around thinking it was someone's cell phone, and they were just ignoring it, which was beginning to get annoying. As we continued to try to ignore it, we soon saw where it was coming from, and at first we couldn't believe it. It was coming from a toy phone, one that sensed you were close to it and would ring if you've got it on. Alex walked up to it, having a joke in mind. He picked it up and said hello, with a conniving little smile on his face. I didn't find the joke amusing, and then things took a sharp turn for the horrifying, because we both heard a voice coming from the other side. Help me, please. It was loud enough that I could hear it clearly from where I was standing, despite not holding it up to my ear like Alex was. Speaking of whom, Alex had a horrified look on his face. He was just staring off into the distance, in complete and utter disbelief that he had heard something on the other side. Something that should not be said on a children's toy. I remember watching him pull the phone from his face, looking it over up and down, back and forth, This toy, it's not Halloween themed. Of course it's not, I said. It's in the kids' toy section. But, he tried to say, why would it say that when you held it up to your ear? I shook my head. He put the phone down, and we ran out of there, finding our mom and sister, begging them to leave. To this day, we do not know why the toy said something like that, or even if it was the toy, not something else. But it's definitely a memory that will always live on in my mind. Somewhere out there, there's a spirit who's suffering, and on Halloween, it calls for help.